Overcoming Tough Problems in Software Projects with Jay Harris.
The Azure DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm empowering software delivery for business-critical software projects, project delivery, and team empowerment using their own ClearMeasure Way methodology for effective software projects. A quick announcement, my architect forums are going strong and signups for the next session are up. So if you are a team lead or lead engineer, if you're leading a software team in some way and are looking to collaborate with other peer architect leaders, then just go ahead and sign up at the link in the show notes and we'd be happy to do it. I actually enjoy facilitating those. And also, for those of you who are looking for Programming with Palermo, which is my video podcast, just search for it in any of the directories and you'll be able to find it. And my guest today on the show is a returning guest, Jay Harris, and he was on the show on episode 84. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. We were speaking about distributed DevOps and how to work with remote teams, but he's back. And Jay is a speaker, a software consultant, and the owner of Arana Software. And he's been developing on the web since 1995 when the Blink tag lured him away from Visual Basic 3. And he's also been awarded as a Microsoft Regional Director, an ASPInsider, Microsoft MVP, multiple awards on the Microsoft MVP side. And recognizing that the greatest application performance bottleneck is a developer's time, Jay is continuing his quest for frameworks and modules and tools and practices that really make developers stronger and fitter and happier and more productive. He is in Las Vegas, and you can follow him on Twitter at Jay Harris. Jay, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Jeffrey. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you. And you've been back out on the speaking circuit. We saw each other in Kansas City just a few months back, but before kind of go into that for the people who maybe didn't see you speak or haven't heard your previous podcast episode, give a little bit of points of introduction, some high points that have kind of shaped your career into what you are working on these days.
Well, for shaping my career, wow. I think, and maybe I suppose that even ties into that bio of making developers, trying to help developers be more productive and happier. The high points in my career, I think, were people, not necessarily events or projects.
Yeah.
Managers in particular. I was incredibly fortunate and privileged to start my career out of the box with an absolute phenomenal manager. His name is Larry Roth, back in Rochester, New York. That's where I got started, working for a company called Navistream. I think they're called Tenant Partners now. They're a brand and identity firm that also does a lot of tech stuff. Of course, it does tech stuff. There's a lot of technology and branding stuff. But even as a young pup way back then, he put a lot of trust and faith in me and my ability to figure things out, even when we had stuff that had to be reverse engineered to figure it out. I mean, you know those projects as a consultant, hey, we got this thing that's old and we need a new thing that works the exact same way, but the old stuff is on archaic technologies. Just port it to the new stuff. It's easy, right?
And nobody remembers it.
Right. As well as Larry had this innate ability to really not only to motivate his team and his staff, but to meet people where they were at. I mean, if you were able to come to the table with 100% of yourself that day, he could help you motivate to bring all 100% of your 100% self. And on the days that you could really only contribute 20% of yourself, he could still motivate you to give 100% of that 20% self. He definitely influenced a lot of how I approached my career. And then ultimately, when I became, when I came into leadership and managerial roles, into how I lead teams as well. But yeah, certainly it's people most that I think that influence and highlight my career over projects and technology stacks.
Nice. There's probably a lot of people out there who heard you recount that amazing manager and are thinking, man, I wish my manager were like that. I'm just so tired. I'm getting burned out. Or maybe you're leading a team right now and you can tell that your people are just working late hours, you're going, but you got a project that probably is on track to absolutely burning them out. What would you say to them? How do you think about those kinds of situations?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of that, if the manager isn't holding up their side of the bargain. You had a great show with episode 257 with Glenn Burnside on managing developers. And he talks a few times through the episode about how it's really the manager's job to sort of clear the path for his team, get things out of the way. I was sort of envisioned it like, do you remember A-Team, the old, from the 80s? And it seemed like episode after episode, the A-Team was walking behind some giant bulldozer with this like 8-foot tall bulldozer blade on the front, and all the bad guys were shooting at them, but the bullets were just ricocheting off of the blade of this giant bulldozer, providing cover for the A-Team. That's sort of how I always envisioned managers. And yeah, with that burnout, a lot of it, man, it's really hard, especially when you're not the manager. But a lot of it comes down to saying no. I feel in many regards we're hesitant to say no because we're in this hierarchy. It's almost I guess for my managerial style, I don't view it as a supervisor. And I think Glenn Burnside was getting at that same thing. It's just another component of the team. And that person's job was more of handling all of the bureaucracy and politics of the business and the corporation, so much as it is making sure you're staying on task and typing at the keyboard. Typing is not the hardest part of my day, nor for any developer. It's all of the thought process and being free of interruption. So, but there's still certainly, as you alluded to, many organizations, many managers where it's still much more of that superior subordinate kind of relationship. We're hesitant to say no, and that's what gets us into working the endless 80-hour weeks, week after week after week. So getting into being comfortable, knowing your limits and respecting your limits, we go to conferences and we talk about finding a work-life balance. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of that is on us to enforce our own work-life balance, knowing our limits and being comfortable pushing back in a professional way, in a productive way, but still pushing back when we're coming up against that limit. Because otherwise, we end up in burnout. With my team, there are times where I will tell them to go home and go play some Xbox, go have some downtime, because even if they it's Monday morning and they don't come back until Friday, them being 100% productive on Friday is far more valuable than then being 10% productive all week long because they're burnt out. So that downtime is very important.
Yeah, being tired in whatever way. I remember sometimes earlier in my career when there was the Friday night deployment window and it stretched into Saturday, stretched into Sunday. Of course, it's been the topic of this is why we need automated DevOps and why we do things differently. But 20 years ago, that was unheard of. Like, nope, take the system down and a whole bunch of people huddle. Well, we are the whole team so tired, up for 24 hours. if there's a problem, we're so tired, there's no way we're going to be effective at fixing that problem. That's like the worst state of mind to try to do something intellectually intensive.
And you're so tired, you're probably going to create a few more along the way, a few more problems along the way.
Right. Well,
absolutely.
You'd mentioned for people in a leadership position saying no. And I want to ask, when business leaders outside the software team, when business leaders are really trying to go after a business objective, or they see, something bad's going to happen in the business and we're going to lose customers, or some super huge thing, this may push us to the point of going out of business, or even just having to lay off people. When they're pushing for something, how is it feasible, and how does a software leader say no, and what does that look like?
Well, having a burnt out team isn't going to help us in the long term. Sure, it may, having that death march of working 80 hours a week for the next couple of weeks might put a Band-Aid on the problem. But once those couple of weeks are over, everybody's going to need some downtime. They need some downtime. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily that no is really more about respecting those limits, honoring those limits, and if those limits have to be exceeded for a short period of time, having some baked-in recovery time as well. It's like going to the gym. I mean, you can push personal record after personal record on on a single day on a gym. You could go work out at the gym for a couple hours and go hard, and then your body needs some recovery time to recover those muscles, to build the new muscle, because otherwise you're going to hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. Or an engine, your car. You can drive your car at wide open throttle for a short period of time, but if you hold it there for mile after mile after mile down the interstate, the engine's going to burn out, and then you're going to be dead on the side of the road, and then you're surely not going to be getting where you're going if you're stuck on the side of the road. So those short bursts are okay as long as there are, one, for a short period of time, and two, have a built-in recovery, baked into the schedule. So that no can also, on one hand, the no is a complete sentence on its own. It can just be no. Or the no can be an opportunity to have some collaborative communication, compromising communication. No, I can't do that, but we can make it work if we then did this other thing.
Aren't those the magic words?
Extra time off. Give me an extra bonus week off that doesn't count against my vacation time for putting in all of this extra time. I mean, sure, we all assumably have vacation time baked into our annual schedules with work, but that's still based on normal theoretical 40-hour work weeks, not putting in 80-hour work weeks to make up for the time that we're on vacation. That's not how it's supposed to work. It's not that we're supposed to bill 2,000 hours of, have 2,000 billable hours in a year. That's what normal salary is based off of, the 52 weeks times 40 hours. The vacation is supposed to be there based on a 40-hour week pace, which we still need some rest and downtime for. And if we're going above and beyond that, I certainly believe that we should be able to compensate and compromise with some extra vacation time, some extra downtime that isn't based off of you get 3 standard weeks of vacation for your 40-hour weeks.
You said something as part of that in the response, the words, no, I can't do that, but we can still make it work, yada, yada. I think those are magic words for an executive who doesn't understand software, doesn't understand what's going into it. And somewhere along the way, a backlog of features and changes was said, okay, these are the things necessary to accomplish the business objective. And they're saying, great, go. And then it just turns out to be a mountain of work. And for an executive to hear no, and then immediately translate that into that business objective is not going to work, that it's going to fail. We don't have any mitigation for this business risk that we're headed straight towards. That is a really hard message to receive, but a message of, hey, we have to change course. We can still make, business objective work. We can still make it work, but we have to change some things and maybe a different solution. Those,
Right.
That's easy for a business executive to receive. It's like, hey, we're going to stop going the direction we're going, and we're going to go in another direction, and you're going to still get what you want.
Well, or some variant that's close to it.
Yes.
Right. And I entirely agree that's a critical skill for anybody in, especially executive leadership, really any leadership but especially with executive leadership. Think about it from building out SOW, statements of work, with a client. Hey, we're going to build this application, and it's going to take this much time and cost you this many dollars. Well, 3 months delivery time isn't going to work for us. We really want it delivered in 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to have to modify the design.
That's not going to work, but we can still make it work if we trim the scope to get it down into, right. There has to be some sort of collaboration and compromise in order to do that. Because otherwise, and I've certainly been a part of those teams and worked for those employers in my career, where sure, we can keep the exact same scope and the exact same dollars and just chop the timeline into a third. Certainly it's frustrating because often the companies, the employers that will do that once will do that regularly. And then you see a sea of burnt out developers on their IT staff because they're just doing yet another death march. And when that death march ends, they're going right into the next death march, because it's just projects stacked on top of each other that are overpromised with too short of a timeline or too small of a team or insufficient resources of some sort.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
ClearMeasure is also happy to be a sponsor of the video podcast, Programming with Palermo. Watch, learn, and program alongside Chief Architect Jeffrey Palermo. Videos are added weekly and available on syndicated locations supporting video podcast or by visiting palermo.network. Tune in today.
You mentioned some things that threaten burnout, but what are the elements of running a software team in your experience that has really enabled the team to continue on at a really good pace of software delivery and keep on going in a sustainable cadence that doesn't burn out anybody, but allows the team to just really excel and keep going?
So there's the old cliche of work hard, play hard. And to me, that's important, though I sort of invert it. I play hard so that I can work hard. The playing hard, and that's not a play hard of, go to Vegas, because that's where Jay lives, go to Vegas and party it up on the Strip for a week. Not like that. Whatever your play, whatever your downtime happens to be, do that fully and authentically. For a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs in a business, when was the last time that they had some downtime with their family and they weren't at the same time chewing on that business problem in the back of their head, or went on vacation and they weren't at the same time also thinking about the business's loss of productivity and loss of money from them sitting on a beach, in addition to the cost of the hotels and the airfare to even put them on the beach to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking about all of those lost billable hours as well. Or developers that are working on a problem. We talk about almost as a joke about how we might come up with, if we go do something else, the idea might pop into our head, or how the solution might pop into our head the next morning in the shower. Who knows? whatever else. But there's still also time where we're sitting there and putting in the extra effort to just think about the problem, putting in extra hours to think about the problem. Or maybe we're sitting at the dinner table with our family and part of our head is still actively thinking about the problem. And we really struggle with those. The things about the idea popped in our head or in the shower or whatever else, it seems to most often comes from when we actually do stop thinking about the thing, when we do something else, when we have some downtime. So for maintaining that velocity, for me, and what I encourage is that it's important to play hard. And by playing hard, again, whatever your play is, if that's going and skydiving or if that's going and playing board games or Magic the Gathering, it doesn't matter. Whatever your play is, do it wholly and authentically and let the workspace stay at work, which of course is so much harder now in post-pandemic world where so many people are working from home and the computer is still right there. It's still so close. Hey, I had an idea. Let me quick run into the home office and quick jam things out for a half an hour. Interrupting our playtime, just like the engines and needing the downtime. And just like our bodies need downtime to recover from that gym session, our brains need that same downtime as well. So making sure that downtime is authentic. From a manager supporting their team doing it, that also means making sure that part of that clearing the way job of a manager is clearing the way for your team, for your staff to go on vacation, to go have some downtime, of them not getting emails about work when they're sitting on a beach, or at least not have the expectation that they're answering the emails. I hope that I'm left on unread for every single email that I send to my team members when they're on vacation. No cell phones going with. Nobody is calling that team member when they're having downtime, because that's their recovery time so that they don't burn out. That's how we prevent the burnout. But, again, especially in this post-pandemic world, it seems that we have this expectation of always accessible with our colleagues on Slack or our team members through email. And we absolutely imperative that we avoid all of that. Let work be at work so that playtime can be there and whole and authentic.
Yeah, that's good. Now, besides just the pace of work, sometimes, and you've talked about some very problematic elements with parts of an application or parts of the architecture that are just technically, they're really hard to push through. And I wanted to ask you about one of those, the user interface. There's user interface technologies that they've come, they've gone, they've come, they've gone way faster than programming languages. And just, you've done a lot of work in that area. What are the trickiest pain points in user interface that you find teams struggle with, and how do they overcome them?
Some of the stuff that we, I guess, work with our clients on and coach our clients on. I guess there's two aspects of it. One, like you said, there's almost this fire hose of new technologies that are coming in, especially in the UI space, particularly with JavaScript, right? The joke is still, every 5 minutes, there's a new JavaScript framework that's released and popular. And we don't have to keep up with the fire hose. There's this worry. There's almost an analysis paralysis on, well, what's the right one to go with? Should we go with, Angular or React or Vue or whatever else? How do we choose if we're entering into the space? And of course, it doesn't matter. I mean, sure, Angular and React and Vue will solve problems in very different ways, but at the end of the day, they're still solving UI problems, and there's not a tremendous amount of difference to the end user, to the person whose problem you are solving. They don't care. Your end users on that website don't care if you're building it in Ruby or Java or .NET. Your end users using your website don't care if it's built on Angular or Vue or React. So for those, it's just a matter to pick one that seems like it'll solve your problems and move on. It doesn't matter if it checks all of the boxes. Just make a choice, and then put in the effort to making sure that is the right choice. Put in the effort to implement that to common practices, and make sure that you're wholly invested to seeing it through, rather than approaching it from this more tentative, apprehensive, avoidant practice of, hey, maybe we'll swap it out with something else in 6 months. I remember what, 20 years ago now, maybe not quite that long, but certainly 15 years ago, even when we were building in the .NET space database integrations. It was back in the days when Entity Framework was first starting to come out, and there were a few other popular ORMs like NHibernate.
Yeah, 07.
And it seemed that there were so many applications that would even abstract that ORM layer, because who knows, 2 years from now, we might want to swap out the ORM layer. Of course, no one ever did.
The database,
ever. Yeah. No one ever swapped out NHibernate with Entity Framework. That application stayed in NHibernate until the day that application died and was wholly rebuilt into something new, MVC, .NET Core, who knows. So just pick it and stick with it. And then beyond that, a lot of the stuff is it's more the nuance of those UIs that are challenging. When we get into the actual implementation details of the experience, not the code, things like one of the most common ones we see. So for our company, Arana Software, we do marketing and software consulting, which blend together so very well. If we're working with a new startup, sure, there might be some really super rich, complex application and logic that is that startup's product that we're working with them to build, but they also need a marketing website that just sits there, it's light and fluffy, and it talks about who the company is and what their workflow is. And the main product might be super deep into to Azure and .NET, but that marketing website is just on Wix or a WordPress website.
It's just an online brochure.
Right. But those online brochure websites often have these ridiculous navigations. Sometimes it feels like 1998 on GeoCities, where there's a menu bar of 10 different options, and each one of those is a flyout of like 10 other options. And beyond those, there's some more flyouts of 10 options. And one that we analyzed and sort of critiqued in a talk recently was even Yale University's website, yale.edu. And on their homepage was something crazy like 70 different navigation options just off of the homepage. And that's too many. We don't need that much. And even more so if now we're starting to delve into that website. We still don't need all 78 options available to us. If we're working on the admissions side of not me as a user that's working on applying for Yale, and I'm into the admissions section of their website, I'm unlikely to want to go deep into sub-navigation of their arts and culture section of the website and learn about the arts and culture of student life. I'm in admissions. Let me just worry about admissions. If I want to get out of it, sure, maybe give the high-level navigation of student life, but all of that sub-navigation to get into the grit of student life, it's just noise. So things like that with the UI, getting rid of the noise of the application and making sure that it's really concise and accessible to our users, so they can. At the end of the day, we're trying to make it easy for them to accomplish tasks, right? To get stuff done. So if we give them too much noise, it's distracting. It's like context switches for a CPU.
Yeah, those are good tips, especially for marketing related websites. Significant software systems do a lot of things, and one of the other integrations that you've spoken quite a bit about is integration with documents. all kinds of documents, like reading them in and then producing them on the way out. And of course, PDF is one of the many, very popular formats.
Yeah, sure.
And from your standpoint, there's some tried and true solutions to it, but I don't think that most teams out there understand the problems that have been solved when just working with documents that ultimately are coming in or going out as PDFs. How can we help out those teams?
Oh, sure. Yeah, PDFs are hard. And we all have them, right? With I don't know many line of business applications that don't need to generate some sort of report.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that all of the line of business customers, they all want it as a PDF.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that most modern browsers, you can print to PDF just the same as you can print to your regular printer. They don't want that. They want a button that they can click on to export it into a PDF. Or maybe it's more complex than that, and put it on some sort of scheduled task, put it on a schedule trigger inside of an Azure function, so it'll kick off Monday morning at 8 a.m. and they get emailed the PDF.
Mm-hmm.
But PDFs are hard. I remember back in the day working with iText Sharp, which wasn't always fun, or the complexities of the PDF where the code had to be right down to not only this is the text I wanted on the PDF, but having to specify the font size and the font face and whether it was bold or italic and what coordinates I wanted the text box to be at on the page and what size. And it was almost like you were recreating the full publication system to map all of this generation out rather than just tossing in some JSON data and calling it a day. Lately, we've really been digging into Adobe PDF services for that. Adobe created this. It's a subscription service, which of course we're getting used to now.
Mm-hmm.
Things like Azure. That's how things are. It's not a go do a one-time license. But they have a subscription service and an API with Adobe PDF services that'll handle all of that stuff for us. And as far as all of the placement of the things, you can build that out in Word, in Microsoft Word. So if we want to do a letter, let's say, but it's a form letter and it's dear blank that you want to be filled in with the Dear J. Harris, or what all of the information, it's generally the same letter, but a couple fields here and there that might be populated with some sort of data. We can create that form letter inside of Word. It's easy, it's accessible. There's so much functionality built into Word for all of that stuff. And it for the data, for the placeholders, it's like building mail merge in Word.
Yeah, those libraries are so good. The Microsoft Office libraries to poke things in.
Right. So it's using the same style as mail merge. So it's the double curly brackets with a variable name.
Yeah.
And then with Adobe PDF services, the API call accepts the docx file.
Nice.
It's got to be that newer. It's got to be that newer Word document. What was it? Word 2007 and later, whatever it was when they switched to a Word document to the newer one.
It has to be at least 16 years young version of Microsoft Word.
Of course. Right. The old binary doc format won't work, but that XML, because it's just basically reverse engineering the XML that is a docx file, right?
Yeah.
So you pass it the docx file and a JSON payload. And the JSON payload just matches the variable names that are in these double curly bracket placeholder tags, and it populates all of the stuff for you. And it'll do it for regular text. It'll do it for collections, so you can identify, hey, if this is like a row in a table or a bulleted list, you don't have to know how many items are in the bulleted list. You just have one bullet with a variable name from the collection, and API services or PDF services will populate all of that stuff out of the collections. And I mean, not just, like a simple string array. It can be complex array objects in a collection, and it'll generate all of that stuff for you. It'll, you can combine PDFs, you can tear them back apart again, you can reverse engineer them back into Word documents. And of course, Adobe's got their e-sign system. So you can run it through their sign API. So, if you have, for one of our clients, we're working on payroll deduction, automatic payroll deduction for certain things. Hey, this contributing to, I don't know, let's call it contributing to your 401k. You authorize the company to automatically deduct this amount of dollars from your paycheck, every paycheck, to put it in your 401k. And we can use the document generation PDF services to sort of build out that letter, and then make a second API call over to the sign API to do all of the signature stuff for you. So you can get a valid, authenticated, encrypted, whatever signature PDF. So much easier than any of the typical NuGet libraries that do all of that stuff locally.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And before we kind of go, as we wrap up on time, so you mentioned this is an online service subscription, and you pay for it on a subscription basis. Walk us through the typical code flow. Let's say they hit the button, I need this document. Some of the documents may be large. When do you think, you know what, I'm just going to put that API, that web service call, behind a button, and I'm just going to make it, synchronous, kind of in process call? And when do you say, no, I don't want them waiting that long because these types of documents may take a little bit longer? And how do you decide what path to take there?
Okay. So as far as all of the code to make that happen, Adobe's built a NuGet library for integrating with all of that stuff. So it's pretty simple to actually make the API call happen. For the most part, it's doing some sort of like a file stream object or whatever else to load up the Word document into memory. And then it's just a couple lines. And same thing with the JSON object. You're going to be passing in some sort of, presumably you're going to be passing in some sort of C# object, and you're just going to run it through one of your typical JSON serializers to turn it into a JSON object. And then it's just a line or two of code to execute the API call, passing it that now in memory Word document along with the now serialized JSON object. And then you'll get essentially a file stream back that is the PDF. Those calls, they all go pretty fast. As far as identifying when to do it synchronously, like within the web request versus offline, generally we found that, we have a good idea of how long the database call is to get the data. And we found generally there's a pretty strong correlation between the two. So if it's the type of request where it's going to take a minute to go get the data out of the database, and you're going to make it more of an offline task just because it's going to take the database a minute to crunch all of those numbers and compile all of the data, that's when we'll also, that's also the appropriate time to even just put the PDF call. So there's a correlation of the two together. I don't know that we've really encountered a scenario where there is a long PDF call time with a very, very small payload and short. I mean, I'm sure the scenario doesn't happen. Maybe if you're, generating a document that has 500 pages in it of already, predefined form, like filling out a pre-existing text that's already in the Word document. Sure, that's going to take a minute, but that's just because we're also transferring a whole lot of data across the wire for a 500-page PDF.
Right.
But that's not a common use scenario. For the most part, it's going to be a very quick generation with a very small payload, or it's going to take a second to generate the PDF, but it's also going to take a second, take a moment to do the PDF call. So I think those correlate well together. And in those scenarios, we'll click a button, and the button will basically go put something on the queue for some sort of offline task processor. And that offline task processor will then make the database call to go get the data and then make the corresponding call to PDF services to make the document.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, that certainly is that's a very important. That's a good thing to point out. That's an important delineation on those two. It's not something you always want to put in the request stream.
Yeah. Well, Jay, as we come to the end of our time here, I appreciate you coming on the show. You've outlined several just perpetually tough problems in software projects that teams have to deal with. So I think the listeners, you got them thinking. You got them thinking about some new concepts. I appreciate you coming on.
I hope they provide value from it. And thank you for having me. I always enjoy time here. And with chatting with you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.